Okay. Can somebody confirm that you can see my screen, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
On for 1 sec. Okay, SG. Somebody joined with the initials SG. Can you just rename yourself to your original name, please? Just so that it's easier for us to identify and talk. Okay, anyway, let's just go ahead and then get started because we have about 25 participants in the class. So that's a good number to get started. I'm not sure. I'm seeing some new names. So maybe there are new people who have joined today. Somebody's video is on. Can you please stop your video? Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the online lecture organized by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. This class is for MA English first year students, and the course is titled Course 2, American Literature. So for those of you who have just, or for those of you who have just joined us, or this is your first American literature class, we started the course by talking about major themes in American literature, and then we moved on to American fiction. Last week we discussed Edgar Allan Poe, his work, his short story, one of his short stories. Then we talked about two great 19th century novelists, Herman Melville, we talked about his Moby Dick, and Mark Twain, we talked about Huckleberry Finn. Today, what we'll do is we will continue the discussion on American fiction and then look at the 20th century and see works of two more great authors. One is Ernest Hemingway, and then we'll talk about Faulkner a little bit. And then if time permits, we'll go on to contemporary fiction. And excuse me, and then see who are the authors there. All right. Okay, am I properly audible? My network is a little, cranky today. So excuse me if I'm breaking up in between.
Audible, sir.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we will start with, where is this? Okay, like I said, we'll talk about two authors, but then objectives of this unit are to first talk about these two authors, and then we will look at one work from each of these. Okay, we'll take one work of Hemingway, we'll take one work of Faulkner, and then we will talk about what did they do in these work, and then how do they differ, not just between themselves, but then with others also. Hold on for 1 second. There is some chat. Okay, good afternoon. Okay, we'll talk about the story, we'll talk about the plot, and then we'll, like we did last time, we'll discuss the themes. And like last time, please make this session a participatory session. I know you will, but just a reminder. Okay, let's start with Hemingway. Okay, that's the sequence in which your book talks. So let's start with Hemingway. But before this, right, last time somebody volunteered to tell us the plot or story of one of the works that we are talking today. I forget who it was. Can you just identify yourself, please? Or is she not in the class this time? One of you said you will give us a summary of one of the works. Manjusha. Okay, all right. Manjusha, can you let me know? Can you let me know which work that you've prepared for? Was it
Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, sir?
Perfect. All right. Okay, so let's first talk about Hemingway, and then I'll give the floor to you so that you can give us a summary. All right, just a quick 3, 4, 5 minutes of summary. Okay. So Hemingway, he is on your screen. His picture is on your screen. He was born in 1899. Hemingway was an American novelist. He, excuse me, he also wrote short story collections. He was also a journalist in the Spanish Civil War and the World War. He is also a Nobel Prize winner. He won the Nobel Prize in 1954. He wrote about 7 novels, 6 short story collections, and then a couple of non-fiction works. So he's been everywhere, basically. Okay. Now, I'm not going to talk about his life because his life is, I mean, you can find it on Wikipedia or some Google page or whatever. But then I'll only mention that, he's done all this. And then in the end, he became suicidal and then he died by suicide. Okay. Okay. Before looking at one of his works, the way I want to do today's class is I'll explain how he wrote. Now, this guy had a writing style. Okay. He just didn't write for the sake of writing. He had a style of his own, okay, which is distinct from other authors. Let us first see what is the style and then how is it different. And then we will go and then look at the work and then we'll see if the style reflects there or not. Okay. Manjusha, can you please lower your hand? The pop-up is just blocking my screen actually. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, like other authors that we have seen, like especially Poe, Hemingway's style was fundamentally shaped by his life experiences. Now, when I say life experiences, this guy has varied life experiences, right? Like I said, he was a journalist in 2 wars. Okay, that must have influenced him pretty much. And these are not very good experiences. And then it kind of sort of reflected in his themes. But anyway, he was... I'm sorry. So as a journalist, he has seen death from a very close distance, right? So that kind of sort of reflects in his writing also. So, but what does this mean? It reflects death and then seeing it close. And then what does it mean that this reflects in his writing? Now, if you look at it in the war, especially the World War I, right? People realize that, central institutions like the government, what is this? What is this government supposed to do?
I don't know.
Parnalata, can you please go on mute? Okay, I'm going to mute her. Okay. So where were we? Oh yeah. In the war, right? People realized that government, institutions like government, they were not able to save its people, right? What is it? We kind of sort of depend on the government to save us, right? From things like war, and then kind of sort of take care of us. Now with World War I, which was one of the major wars in the starting of the 20th century, people realized that, well, government is actually not doing this, right? People died everywhere and politicians couldn't do anything to stop it. Okay. And people realized that, politicians said something, but then the reality was something else. Okay, that was the general society. Now, from a literature perspective, this reflected as, moving away from the 19th century writing, which was like elaborate and then which was using a lot of literary devices like we have seen. So from a literature perspective, they said, well, the old ways are not working out. Let's try something new. Okay, we will try something new. We will experiment. So Hemingway especially moved away from this and then he created a new style. Now, one thing that you'll have to remember about Hemingway's style is he used the simplest language possible. Okay, all his sentences are simple sentences. All his characters speak in super simple sentences. There's no decoration, quote unquote, to his characters. Okay, he was basically trying to say more with less. So his words are less, but then he will, as we will see in the next few minutes, he will say more with less words. So we will call this a minimalistic style. Okay, why is it minimalistic? Because he's using minimum number of words to put across his message in the maximum impact style. All right, so we call this a minimalistic style. Okay. Before Manjusha gives us a recap or a summary of his work, right? I just want to make one point. Hemingway actually had a theory. He theorized his writing style. He basically called it Iceberg Theory. Now, I'm sure everybody knows what an iceberg is, but just for your reference, the picture is on your screen. What's an iceberg? Iceberg is big block of ice in the middle of water. Okay. Now, the peculiarity of an iceberg is you only see the tip. Okay. Majority of the iceberg is actually underwater. What you see is like maybe 1/8 part of an iceberg, and majority of the rest of the iceberg is actually underwater. You don't see it. Okay. So what Hemingway says is if a writer of a prose knows what he's writing about, he knows enough of what he's writing about, he can omit things that he knows. Okay, just like the iceberg, he can actually hide things. He can omit talking about them. But when he omits, the first question that will hit us is, if he omits, then how will we know as readers, right? But what Hemingway says is, if the prose writer knows what he is writing about, and then he does not show the whole picture, like the iceberg, which is big chunk is hidden under the water, the reader can still understand. Now, what does this mean? It makes sense for the iceberg, right? It's just a physical object. Part of it is outside the water, part of it is inside the water. It makes sense for an iceberg. But for writing, what does this mean? What can be visible and what can be hidden? What on earth is Hemingway talking about here, right? So what Hemingway is talking about is, he says aspects of writing like words, gestures, other peripheral things, right, that are visible on the page. You obviously have to read, so somebody has to write, and then they write in words, they write in a language. So these are the visible features. What is not visible in writing are, beliefs, values, the biases that the characters have, the fears that they have, their internal feelings. These are hidden in Hemingway's style. Okay, he does not give elaborate explanations of what the person is going through, what he or she is thinking, what is their excuse me, what is their thought process and all. Okay, that's why it's super simplistic. So going back to the iceberg analogy, right? He does not explain the hidden stuff. He lets it be hidden. Okay, he says all these things like beliefs, values, biases, fears, feelings, all these should be hidden. They should not be told to the reader explicitly. Now, as a reader, we will still understand the hidden stuff because the way he writes. Okay, that's where the greatness of Hemingway lies. Okay, the way he writes in these simple sentences, even though he's not explicitly telling us things, we will still understand as a reader. Now you will only understand when you actually read the text. So if you have time and the interest, please go ahead and then read The Sun Also Rises. It's a beautiful book. You will enjoy his writing. So anyway, because he hides or omits certain things from his writing, right? The iceberg theory is also called theory of omission. Okay? I am really not sure if the book talks about iceberg theory, but this is probably additional information. Just keep it in mind, because this is what characterizes Hemingway's writing. Okay, if you can remember that analogy of iceberg, and then something is visible, something is not visible, you will understand what Hemingway is talking about. So in his work too, the things that he doesn't say, okay, so in an iceberg, right, the tip of the iceberg is visible, but that is not the strongest part of the iceberg. The strongest part is actually hidden inside, right? In a similar way, what Hemingway says is the things that he doesn't say contribute most to the story. It's not what he says, it's what he's not saying that contribute most to the story. Now, what we'll do is we'll see all this with an example after the summary that Manjusha will give. But I just want you to understand what this iceberg theory is. Any questions on the iceberg theory of Hemingway? Okay, no questions. I'm assuming no questions. I don't see anything in okay chat. Okay, good. So let's move on. So a related thought is like we discussed, Hemingway's style is filled with simple sentences. But then immediately you will, but then I'm also saying that, there is an underneath meaning to it. There is this big chunk of iceberg inside and all. So is it really simple? Maybe his language is simple, but then is his style really simple, right? So this makes you think, the simplicity is sometimes very deceptive because like, again, going back to the iceberg, there is a lot hidden. So from a reader's perspective, we need to actually dig out these hidden aspects. Hemingway is not directly telling us any of this. We have to find out, right? But again, the greatness of Hemingway lies in the way he writes. The way he writes, we will automatically find out. Okay. So basically, he says if the writer perfectly knows what he or she is talking about or writing about, then the reader can easily understand not only what is being said, but also what is not being said, right? If you remember from the last class, we were talking about Poe, and then Poe said something similar, right? He said, words and all are okay. You're writing it in language, this, that, and all. Okay, that's fine. But to actually find the meaning of a written text, you should go one level beneath the words, right? If you remember Poe's theory, he also, about the short story, he basically says, yeah, fine, language is just one level of it. But then if language tells you everything, if words tell you everything peripherally, then what's the point of writing? He basically says that's not how you should write. The way it should be written is words are there, but then you'll have to go one level beneath and then actually think about those words to actually get the meaning. So it kind of sort of aligns to what Poe is saying and then Hemingway is saying. Okay. I'll stop with the iceberg theory. So two things we'll have to remember. One is Hemingway writes in very simple language. Okay. Second thing is that simplicity can sometimes be deceptive. It is not that he's writing simply, simple sentences. He's writing in simple sentences. That doesn't mean he's talking about simple stuff. He's talking about complicated stuff. All right. Okay. With that, I will ask Manjusha to give a very quick overview of The Sun Also Rises. And then what we will do is we'll talk about the characters and then we'll talk about the themes. All right. Manjusha, over to you. You can unmute yourself and then go ahead.
Okay, so thank you. The Sun Also Rises, that is a novel, as you said, sir, that is written by Ernest Hemingway in 1926. In this novel, the novelist portraits about American and British expatriates who travel from Paris to the festival in Pamplona to watch the running of bulls and bullfights. So in those days, the people were very interested in the bullfights, and this novel is about the two persons who are traveling to watch the bullfights. So the summary here, the setting is in Paris in the mid-1920s. Jake Barnes, the narrator, provides background about his friend Robert Corn. So here both friends are there, Jake Barnes and Robert Corn. These two people are now traveling to watch the bullfights, and the novel, what is the present in the novel is the between the characters who they are involved. So like so many are there, we will see. Corn is from a rich family, but he squandered most of his inheritance. Okay, next after that they both set to the Paris to watch the bullfight. In meanwhile, Jake meets a prostitute, Georgette, and takes her out for the dinner. She attempts to kiss him, but he stops her because a war wound has left him impotent. Okay, next. After this scene is over, the next comes Lady Brett Ashley. She is the love of the Jake's life. And after watching the Lady Brett Ashley's, the beauty, the Corn, friend of Jake, immediately falls for her. Jake leaves in taxi with Brett and kisses her, but she stops him. She does not love him. However, she doesn't want to be monogamous with any important man. And here the next character comes Mike. This Mike is the person to whom the Lady Brett Ashley got engaged. But this Lady Brett Ashley has many affairs with many men over there. Jake's friend Bill, a successful writer, arrives to Paris. They plan a trip to Pamplona for bullfighting festival. Jake and Brett run into Brett, who has just returned from San Sebastian. That evening, they go out with Brett and Mike, who invite themselves along for the trip to Spain. Next, after the scene is over, again they stay at a hotel at a night and they go for to watch the bullfighting. At the bullfighting, there is a man called Pedro Romario, who is a very good bullfighter, and the Jake is very fond of him. As Brett falls for Romario, Mike directs his anger at Con and verbally attacks him. And here again, the Brett Ashley is falling for Pedro, who is a bullfighter. So in this novel, we can see this Ashley. She is fallen for many men. Okay, next. After that, the Mike, who is engaged to Ashley, he leaves Ashley and he goes away. Next, after this, what happens is the Romero and the Ashley both leave the town together. So what happens in middle, we don't know. But again, the Brett calls Jake, and she says that she wants to meet him. So at the end of the novel, what happens? I mean, they two travels in a taxi, and they are both talking to each other. So when So in the taxi, the Brett will say that Jake could have and had damned good time together. The Jake replies, "Yes, isn't it pretty? Think so." So this is the ending lines of the novel. So in this novel, we can see that characters are there: John, Jake, and Con, Bill, Mike, and Romero. So the novel and Ashley. Ashley, this is the key role in the novel. So that's it, sir.
Great. Thank you. You did a great job, Manjusha. Thank you very much. So what I'll do is I'll kind of sort of very quickly tie this together. Okay. This book is actually divided into 3 parts. Okay. So there are three books inside one book. Like Manjusha said, on the surface, it is a love story between this guy, Jake Barnes. And then he's a guy who served in the World War. He gets hurt in the World War and becomes impotent. So he's unable to have sex. And then this is a love story between this guy and who is impotent, and then this lady called Lady Brett Ashley. Okay. Now, why is this important? Because Jake has not only seen the horrors of the war, but also the after effects of it. He survived the war, right? If he was in the war and then he died, that's a different story. But this guy actually survived the war. Now, what can be an impact? There will be a huge mental impact on this guy, right? He has seen his friends die. He has seen humongous number of people die and the devastation of war. So this guy has a very, very unstable and then very impacted mindset. Okay. Now, like the summary says, Brett, this lady, has numerous love affairs. She's an independent woman, but then she has a lot of love affairs. And this is a general reflection of the society in 1920s. This is not just one character from Hemingway's novel. Okay. After the World War, people were so, they didn't have any confidence on anything. Okay. They didn't know what the meaning of life is. So they kind of sort of went to different directions, like, drug abuse, alcoholism, having sexual affairs with others. So this is a general reflection of the society in the 1920s. It's not just one character. Okay. So anyway, she has an affair with Jake's friend, and then she seduces a young bullfighter, and, this lady, keeps going around. So all through this story, what you'll have to realize is this Brett and Jake, right? These two people are in actually love with each other. But both of them know that they have no chance at a stable relationship. Okay, which is the most pitiful part of this whole story, right? Now, there are these two people who are in love with each other. They know that they are in love with each other, but they also know that there is no way they can have a stable relationship. Now, again, the story is filled with bullfighting, fishing, drinking alcohol, and then there's jealousy between men for Brett's attention. Like Manjusha said, Jake, Robert, Romero, Mike, all of them want Brett. Okay, there's this woman around who the whole story is weaved. Now, book 3, right? The last part of the story is about the aftermath of this fiesta that they go to in Spain. So now Jake goes to wherever. Then he receives a telegram from Brett asking for help. Brett says, "Oh, Jake, I'm in trouble. Please come and then help me." What she does is she tries to get together with Romero, but then she leaves him. And then she asks Jake. And then, like Manjusha said, the novel ends with Jake and Brett going in a taxi and then speaking of the things that might have been, right? I don't remember the exact words that Manjusha said, but, they are thinking about what if, right? They are thinking about things that might have been. Now, things might have been basically mean what could have happened if Jake and Brett got married or they were together, right? So it kind of sort of ends on a very melancholy note. And then these two people are actually wondering, oh, if we got married, then what would have it been like, right? So the whole story ends that way. Okay, great. Now, let's talk about the themes of this. The 3 themes are already listed on your screen. I will talk about the lost generation. But can somebody tell me where alienation comes into this whole story? Alienation, like we discussed multiple times, it is a major theme of American fiction in general. So where do you think alienation comes in here? Anybody? Okay, that's fine. Let me start with lost generation then, and then maybe you can think about where alienation comes and love comes into picture, and then we can discuss. So One major theme is lost generation. But what is lost generation? And why are they lost? Or did they lose something? Right? Now, lost generation is generally used. The term is used. These are a set of people who were in early childhood during the World War I. Okay, so now you can imagine a person in his teens or early adulthood. Sorry, so in his or her teens, and then there's a world war happening. What's the impact mentally on them? Right, the war left a permanent impact on these people, and they were lost. As in, they didn't lose something. They were lost, as in disoriented or directionless. They didn't know what to do after the war because of the impacts. And this was how most of the war survivors were. It's not specific to one person or one character in Hemingway's book. This is the general society, right? They were directionless. They were lost. This whole phrase, right? Lost generation. I think Gertrude Stein coined this term. Stein was another American novelist. But anyway, lost generation is one of the themes. Now, why is lost generation one of the themes? If you look at this protagonist, Jake, right? Jake experiences war, then also experiences the after effects of the war. Okay, and then he's absolutely lost after the war. It's not just physical problem that he has because of the war wound, but then he is also mentally, quote unquote, damaged because of the war and then the horrors of it. Right. So you can see how the lost generation has or comes out like a theme. Now, a related theme is alienation. Why? Because the characters in this novel are unable to live normally. Okay, all these people are misfits for the society. Why? Because of the trauma that they have been through. All these people have lived through the war. So they are not normal, quote unquote, normal people. But we just cannot say that, these are not normal people and leave it there. How are these people still living then? Right? I mean, if the war has so much impact on them, why are these still people living? Right? How do they come out of this trauma? Now, what you'll have to see is the remedies are multiple, none of which are good actually. But then what is this remedy for alienation? One way is drinking alcohol. So alcohol plays a major role in this whole book. They keep drinking humongous amounts of alcohol. These are all drunkards. Okay. And then they think that that is a remedy for trauma. They say, you drink alcohol and then forget the reality. Another remedy of this alienation is watching sports like bullfighting and everything, right? Why? Because these are all very, violent sports. And then watching bullfighting with friends. Now, Jake watches this whole thing with his friends, Robert and everybody. Brett Ashley is also there. So anyway, watching this with friends is a way in which, the characters forget the trauma and try to remedy their experiences. They say, okay, let's watch this. And then, there's so much of excitement. So this is one way of them forgetting the reality. Okay. So that's how alienation comes into picture. Any questions so far? You people have been awfully quiet today. Any questions? Afroz, Lily? Oh, I see 32 participants.
No, sir.
Okay.
Sir,
yes.
Rivalry and insecurity also can be seen as the themes here, sir.
Very good. Very, very good observation. Yes. But explain to me why.
Because Robert Kahn is mentioned that he is fighting with others like Mike and for a lady love.
Right.
There is rivalry seen, sir.
Okay.
And insecurity also seen regarding this lady, Brett Ashley.
Okay. No, Brett Ashley is not insecure, right? I mean, people are insecure.
He is not insecure, but
right.
Robert Kahn is insecure there, sir.
Right. He gets into a fight with Romero. He gets into a fight with Mike. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's an excellent observation. Good. Okay. Any other theme that you can think of? Or let me put the question in a different way. Okay. I've listed love as a theme, right? I don't think the book talks about this theme, but I've listed love as a theme. How is love a theme?
It's more like lust here.
It's
more
good.
like lust here.
Right. From okay. That's lust from a Brett Ashley perspective, right? That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Yeah. Very good. Now, we also mentioned that, we also discussed that at the starting of the story, right? We know that Jake and Brett are in love. but they also know that it's a lost cause. I mean, they cannot really do anything about it, right? So it's also love between Jake and Brett, love between Brett and her fiance Mike, and then love between Romero and Brett. We cannot call it love, but then you're right, Lily. We can call it lust. And all these characters have different kinds of feelings for Brett, and then eventually love, lust, these come out as a theme, right? What I really like in your answers is, I don't think the book lists any of these themes except for alienation. I'm not sure, but what we are doing here is we are proving the fact that once we know the story or the plot of a work, we can come up with themes. So let me go back to my, rhetorical repeated dialogue or sentence. If you read the first chapter of this coursework, it will give you a general idea of what the themes are. And the rest of the book is only reading the stories and reading the characteristics and then relating those to the first chapter, to the general themes. Of course, I mean, the stories will have some specific themes, but then the easiest way to write the answer is be perfect in the first chapter and then keep going back and then relating the story, whatever story it is. Or it might be a novel or prose short story or whatever. Just relate it back. Okay. TK, this is good. Anything else from anybody else, or can we move on? Okay, let's just move on. Okay, fine. This is fine. We have discussed the sun also rises. There is a theme, this, that, and all. Okay, fine. But let's go back to Hemingway's style. We started saying that Hemingway's style is simple sentences, Iceberg Theory, and all, right? Now, if you actually read this is classic Hemingway. It is written in simple sentences. No extra information is given whatsoever. Only the most required information is given, and then the reader is left to understand the rest. Okay, so this falls right in line with the Iceberg Theory. He's not giving you any extra information. He's not decorating his language with anything. Is pretty straightforward. Now, for example, Hemingway, right, in this novel, he doesn't say explicitly that Brett is beautiful, right? But I can challenge you. All of you thought that Brett is beautiful. Why? Because all these guys are going again for her, right? I mean, all Hemingway says is people turn their heads whenever Brett walks by or something like that, okay? And just by that sentence, we understand that Brett is beautiful. When do people turn their heads? When somebody is beautiful and then they're walking by. So that's the style of Hemingway. As a reader, we understand that Brett is beautiful, even though the author hasn't explicitly mentioned it. That's just an example, but then that's how Hemingway comes across in his work. Another thing in Hemingway is that he avoids abstract or complicated words. Okay, some words like honor or whatever, right, which are very subjective. He tries to avoid those kind of things. It's very straightforward. So it's you read it, you understand it. Now, how does he do this? How can he write these simple sentences, and what technique is he using? Okay, let me just throw one technical term at you. The striking feature that Hemingway is, he just stacks one sentence after the other. Okay, it's just multiple simple sentences, one after the other. That's all. No commentary, no explanation, no decoration, nothing. It's just one simple sentence, full stop, another simple sentence, full stop, another simple sentence. So it's all a series of short sentences. Okay. Now the technical term for this is parataxis. Okay. I can probably write it in the chat. One sec. Okay. I sent it in the chat. Okay. It's called parataxis. What is parataxis? It's basically independent English phrase, or not English, but independent phrases that are placed side by side without any conjunctions. Okay, the classic example of parataxis is what that guy Caesar said, right? Julius Caesar said, "I came, I saw, I conquered." Right? He didn't say, "I came, I sat, and then I sat, and then I had a coffee, and then I saw people, and then I made an army, and then I conquered." He didn't say all that. He just said, "I came, I saw, I conquered." Done. There's no and, there's no subordinate conjunctions, there's nothing. It's just three simple phrases. So this is an example of parataxis, but parataxis is used by Hemingway in his work Left, Right, and Center. Okay, that's his most striking feature. Okay. We will move away from Hemingway, and then we'll talk about another very great author who is also a Nobel Prize winner, Faulkner. Any questions on Hemingway before we move to Faulkner? Okay. Faulkner, again, late 19th century. He was born in late 19th century, 1897. He was an American novelist and a short story writer. Like I said, he won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1949. Now, Faulkner is different from Hemingway in multiple ways, and then we'll see how. Faulkner's work is rooted in his Southern background. To understand what Southern background is, you'll have to know that America is North and South. South is where there were, if you have read or watched videos on American history, South is where all the slaves were there. Okay, Southern states were for slavery and racial discrimination. So anyway, Faulkner, his work is rooted in Southern background. Doesn't mean he's a racist or anything, but he was born in Mississippi, which is one of the Southern states. While he was against racial discrimination, Faulkner, his views on desegregation are a little controversial. Okay, desegregation basically means against racial discrimination, having a specific space for blacks and having specific space for whites. That's segregation. You're segregating the races into multiple places. Desegregation is, taking away the racial segregation. While he basically says, slavery and then this desegregation and everything, it is super bad. He also says desegregation should not be forced, and it should be, it should go in a slow manner. Now you can see why this is controversial, right? He's basically saying racial discrimination is bad, but then it should not be forced. Coming away from racial discrimination should not be forced. It should go slow. So it's super controversial. He got a lot of criticism for this. Anyway, Faulkner is different from Hemingway in one big way. Okay, Hemingway, as we saw, was minimalistic. He used simple sentences, and then his work was pretty straightforward. He did not provide elaborate commentary. But Faulkner, on the other hand, used something called stream of consciousness technique. Does anybody know what stream of consciousness is? Did you come to, I don't know, Virginia Woolf or James Joyce or anybody in your British literature course? Or not yet?
No, we didn't go to that yet.
Okay, you didn't go to that yet. But does anybody know what stream of consciousness is? That's a pretty important topic to know in literature.
Maybe a little bit idea, but it's better to get to know from you.
Okay, yeah, but go on. That's fine. Okay, stream of consciousness basically is a narrative technique to depict, the various thoughts and feelings which go on in the mind of the narrator. Okay, so you have this character, and then this character will have thoughts, obviously, right? Now, stream of consciousness is a technique where these thoughts are flowing in the mind of the narrator, and then the thoughts are written as is in the book. Okay. Now, these thoughts might not be related. For example, right, you might currently be thinking about Faulkner because we are talking about him. Then you might think that it's already 12:45, and then you might be thinking about lunch. Then you might be thinking, oh, it's so hot outside, let me have an ice cream. Then about how, Monday you have to go to work. I mean, there's only one Sunday, and then there's still classes, all these, right? All these are distinct thoughts in your brain, in your mind. They're coming and going out of your mind. Stream of consciousness is basically writing about this thought process. Okay, these distinct thoughts that are going in and out of your mind. Now, those thought processes, if you put just like that on a piece of paper, that's stream of consciousness, because consciousness is a stream. It's not, individualistic. It's just, it flows, right? So that's stream of consciousness. Okay. Like I said, you'll learn more about this when you discuss James Joyce or Virginia Woolf in your British literature course. Okay. But for now, remember that Faulkner used this technique in his works. Okay. We have discussed this in offline class, but let me just very quickly give a summary. We will discuss Light in August. Now, this is a work that was published in 1932. This is a novel that is set in the interwar period. So between World War I and World War II. That's when, or end of World War I and starting of World War II. That is when this novel is set. And then the story revolves around a pregnant white woman and then a man. Okay. We will talk about the techniques and everything after we talk about the plot and the story. But one thing you'll have to remember is flashbacks they are used a lot in the story. So Faulkner keeps going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in his narrative style. But anyway, like I said, the novel is basically set between the wars, and then it is set in the American South in the 1930s or so. So you can imagine, you can actually imagine in your mind, American South in the 1930s is where racial discrimination is at the peaks. Okay. So anyway, it begins with this lady called Lena Grove. That's one of the protagonists. She's a young pregnant white woman. Now she is trying to find the father of her unborn child. She's pregnant, but then the father has run away. This guy gets fired from his job. And then he says, okay, let me move to some other place. When I go there, I will send you a letter or I'll send you word. And then you can come and then, live with me. Of course, as you might imagine, he doesn't send any word. So Lena Grove, now she's ripe and pregnant, right? I mean, she's ready to give birth. Now she searches for this guy. She starts hitchhiking to Mississippi, where she thinks that this guy is working. Okay. She finds this guy ultimately, and then but then this fellow has changed his name to something else. In a series of events, I won't go into the events, but in a series of events, what happens is another guy called Byron Bunch is the nice guy. Okay. In this whole story, he's the nice guy. He falls in love with Lena, but then he's a shy guy, so he doesn't express it. And then he feels that, it is his responsibility to make Lena find the father of her unborn child. Okay. So this father of the unborn child who has run away from Lena and then settled in Mississippi, right? That guy has changed the name to Joe Brown. Okay. That's the second name on your screen. Okay. Lena Grove is the lady. Joe Brown is the guy who's ditched Lena Brown, and then he's run away. Okay, then the novel, what it does is Faulkner shifts to another scene, to another strand. This is the story of Joe Brown's partner, Joe Christmas. Okay, this guy is really important in this story. One thing, this guy is a psychopath. Okay, and he's a known criminal. He's been running away from the police all his life. So this guy's job at the mill is just a cover. Okay, he works in the same company, industry, whatever you call it, along with Joe Brown and this Byron guy. Okay, all of them work with each other. That work is just a cover. He's actually secretly making and selling alcohol. And during this time, right, interwar period, during this time, selling or making alcohol, drinking alcohol was prohibited in the US at that time. So this is illegal stuff that this fellow is doing. Now he has a relationship with another character called, I think, Joanna Burden. Yeah, it's listed on your screen, 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth name. So he has a relationship with this lady who is an older woman. And after some incidents, right, she gets murdered. Now, the novel doesn't explicitly say that Joe Christmas or Joe Brown, which of these is a murderer. It doesn't explicitly tell you who is the murderer. Now, Joe Brown is seen leaving this lady's burning house. Okay, somebody kills her, and then they set the house on fire, and then they go. Police first suspect Joe Brown. But then they start searching for Joe Christmas. When Brown goes and says, Christmas is a black guy, so he might have done it. So they start searching for Joe Christmas. Eventually, what happens is Christmas is arrested and then jailed, and then he escapes and is later killed. Okay, that's a very gist of the story. In the meantime, what happens is this Lena is still pregnant, right? So Lena delivers the baby, but Joe Brown, what he does is he leaves her again and runs away. This fellow he's not the dad material, right? He runs away again. At the end of the story, what happens is an anonymous man, Faulkner doesn't name him. He is talking to his wife about two strangers he picked up on a trip. And then these strangers are actually Lena and then Byron, the nice guy we were talking about, right? Who falls in love with Lena, but then he's, reluctant to tell her. These two people are still searching for Brown, okay? Reluctantly, but they're still searching for Brown. So that's how the story ends, okay? Okay. Now, as you can see, the novel is very violent, first thing. There is murder, there are other crimes, and then, it's a little gory at times. And then the structure of the novel is a little confusing because it goes between the present and then flashback and then shifts from one character to another very fast and everything. But that's not what we are interested in. What we are interested in are the themes, right? Before we go into the themes, why did Faulkner name it Light in August? What has this got to do with any light? right? We just discussed a story about a pregnant woman who went through troubles. And then there is this Christmas guy, and then there is this brown guy who are both bad. So where is light in this? If anything, this is a dark novel. So why did he name it Light in August? Any ideas or any guesses? Why is the title of this book Light in August?
Maybe, sir, the murder happened in the month of August, as in the
Okay.
book says. So
Okay.
that's the day of Friday. So maybe because of the Friday, Christians' good day means, so that's the light of, means, or else it can be the murders happen, no? So the fire, because of that fire, it's called light.
Okay, very
August.
good. Okay.
Maybe.
Okay, yeah, no, good interpretation. Good. I'm not sure if I agree with the first one, but I do definitely agree with the second one. Okay, so one way is to any other insights? Does anybody else have any other? Yes, Silas.
Sir, the month of August, just there was a light on the day, the same day the murder was happened. There is no other connection between the title of the story, means story and the title. It was just light happened on the month of August, on that day of murder.
Okay, good. You're telling us Faulkner's way of interpretation. Actually, that's good. Okay, so like Ishrat and Sai Lakshmi said, there are multiple ways of interpreting this, right? One way is to look at the word light as in, making it light, as in something is heavy and then you're making it light by removing some weight, right? In this interpretation, we can see Lena Grove, who is pregnant at the starting of the story, but by the end of the story, she becomes light because she's delivered a baby, right? All this happens in August, so Light in August. That is one way of interpreting this particular title. Another interpretation is what Ishrat mentioned. That is that light refers to actual light or fire. Now, if you remember in the story, Joanna Burden's house is set on fire, right? And that is the center of the story. That is where, everything comes together. So this happens in August, so Light in August. Okay, that is another way of interpreting. A third way of interpreting is light can also mean as enlightenment, right? At least one of the characters, we didn't talk about him, but one of the characters realizes his past deeds are wrong and he feels responsible for his wife's death and everything, and he has an enlightenment phase. So it can be interpreted in this way also, saying that the light is actually not, tube light or fire or something, it's enlightenment. Okay. All these are different interpretations, right? The only thing that this proves is you cannot have one interpretation of a piece of work in literature. There are bound to be different interpretations. It just depends on what lens you're looking at or looking through at the work. Okay, this is all fine. But then what does Faulkner say about the title? So somebody actually interviewed him and then they asked, okay, why did you name it Light in August? And what Faulkner says is where he lived in Mississippi. This is, I'm coming to Sai Lakshmi's explanation. So he says where he lived in Mississippi in the month of August, there are a couple of days in month of August where the days are brighter. There is just light, unexplained light. They're just brighter, that's all. More light during the day. He says the story kind of sort of reminded him of those days. So he titled Light in August. Okay, that's his explanation. Now, is Faulkner correct or Sai Lakshmi correct or Ishrat correct or Ashwin correct? Everybody is correct, right? We all can look at it in a different way. We all can look at it from a different lens, and then we'll all come up with different interpretations. Okay, now let's move on to the themes of this novel. Again, you see alienation here, right? Alienation pretty much is in every single work that we have discussed so far, and it will also be there in all the works that we discuss in the subsequent classes. Okay, so that's one big pointer for you. Any question that comes on themes, you can directly put alienation there and then relate it to the story. Okay, so why alienation though? Like we saw with Hemingway's characters, most of the characters in this novel are also social misfits in one way or the other. Okay, not directly social misfits maybe, but then in one way or the other, they are not fit for society. Okay, so they experience alienation. They feel out of place. For example, Byron Bunch, right? A nice guy who falls in or who fell in love with Lena, and then he doesn't tell her. He's accepted in where he lives, Jefferson, where he lives, but then he's still viewed as a mystery, or his character is simply overlooked by other characters in the story. Another character is Joe Christmas and Lena Grove. They are strangers in one town that they go into because they're coming from somewhere else, right? Both of them are experiencing alienation. Both of them are social misfits because Joe Christmas, this guy is very violent, and then he picks up fights with everybody. White, black, doesn't matter. He picks up fights with everybody. Lena is actually looked down upon because of the Puritanistic values, right? I mean, because in those times, people thought, getting pregnant without getting married is a bad thing to do. So because of those values, Lena is looked down. So most characters in this story experience alienation one way or the other. All right. And like I said, alienation is one of the most important themes. So just remember that, and then try and then relate it to the story that you're writing about. Now, the second theme that I'm going to talk about is Christian symbolism. This is very apparent with one thing. The guy's name is Joe Christmas, right? That's directly talking about Christian symbolism. But we can also see many instances of, Christian allegories and symbolism from the Bible in this particular work. You'll have to read the work to actually kind of sort of relate it to that. But Christian symbolism finds a lot of value in this book. Another thing is good and evil. This is also very straightforward because Joe Christmas stands for evil because he's suspected to kill somebody, and then he's leaving his wife and or his partner, and then his unborn child, their unborn child, and then leaves. So he's the bad here. He's the evil here. Lena is portrayed as good in the novel because, what is she going to do, right? A single lady who is pregnant, and what else can she do except, go and then search for her partner, right? So she's good in this. People are good to her. People give her food and shelter and everything in the novel. So she's portrayed as good. Now, Byron, our nice guy, right? Again, the guy who falls in love with Lena. That guy is the link between this good and evil. Okay, he keeps coming and going in between these two people. He's in love with Lena. He doesn't tell her that. He's a friend of Joe Christmas because they work in the same factory or company or whatever you call it, mill that they work together. This guy is the link between this good and evil. Okay. Now, good and evil is such a generic theme that you can take any character and then say that this character is good or evil. We can argue either ways. Okay. This is where in the offline classes, when I said this is where your subjectivity comes into picture. All right. Make sure in your exams, when you write about it, when you are saying good or evil, you'll have to also provide some information on why do you think that character is good? Why do you think that character is evil? Right. I cannot just say Lena is evil and then keep quiet about it. I'll also have to explain why I think Lena is evil. Is that right or wrong is a different story. But when you write the answer, just mention why you think that a particular character is good or evil or whatever you write. Okay. Okay. Any other themes that people can think of? Anybody?
Crime
We've
and
already talked
violence.
about alienation, Christian symbolism, and good and evil. Anything
Crime
apart
and
from
violence.
sorry, Afroz, what was that?
Crime and violence.
Okay, crime and violence. Okay, good. Manjusha, were you trying to say something? Okay, maybe not. Anything else? Crime and violence, good.
Sir, can we say, name this novel as Gothic one?
Good question. Name this novel as Gothic. Yes, we can name it as Gothic depending on what's your definition of Gothic. What do you mean Gothic?
Mystery.
Mystery. Okay, that's one of the aspects of Gothic. Okay. Anything else? Why do you think this is Gothic? We can name it as Gothic, but why?
As you named it, according to the formation of this this novel, medieval it is, maybe for that.
Okay, say that again, because it is what? Medieval.
Medieval, yes. As it is in 1932, so I think so.
Okay. Yeah, you can call it again, right? There are different aspects of Gothic literature, right? One of the descriptions in this novel is about the place, I forget which one. I think it's the mill or one of the places that these people live in. It's a dilapidated old kind of place that they live in. Okay. So that's like a very prominent characteristics of a Gothic novel. So it depends on how you look at it, right? If you have elements of Gothic in it, then definitely. And then this does have elements of Gothic in it, right? So think about it. Think about other Gothic characteristics that you have. Have you gotten to Castle of Otranto or Walpole's or Frankenstein or something in British literature?
Yes, ma'am has just discussed about them.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you're right. So I'm sorry. I forgot. I didn't get your name. Subhasmita, right?
Subhashmita.
Acha, okay. Yeah, you're right. You can call it as a Gothic novel as long as you can corroborate your own answer or give some more details on why you think it's a Gothic novel, right? Again, like I said, a piece of literature can be looked at in different ways, right? If I look at it from a feministic perspective, then I'm going to concentrate on Lena Grove and then basically talk about what are the different problems that she's gone through because of the patriarchal structure. Okay, that's the feminist view, and that's fine, right? Because I'm looking at it from a feminist lens. Now, when you call it in a similar way, when you call it Gothic, you'll have to also explain why you think it's a Gothic one. And I think you did a good job in explaining why it is. But yeah, Gothic, fine. But what are the other themes?
Theme is a thriller, we can say.
Thriller.
Can
we name it as racism and freedom?
Perfect.
Something?
Okay, very good. Even though we didn't discuss really about it, race kind of sort of comes directly at you at the starting of the novel itself. This fellow, right, Joe Christmas, he's portrayed as a white man, not portrayed, but then he's treated as a white man, but then he thinks he's of mixed race. Okay, he thinks that his parents are white and black. All right. So race comes out at you at the starting of the novel itself. So race plays a very big deal. And like Lily is saying, racism and what was the other one that you said?
Something related to freedom, liberation.
Okay, good. Yeah. Again, these freedom and liberation are different. It comes across in different ways in different characters, right? For Joe Christmas, the freedom is just, leaving everything and then going away. He keeps leaving this lady, right? For Lena Grove, freedom is, having a husband and then having a child and then living peacefully with them, right? For Byron Branch, the freedom is, feelings for Lena Grove, and that's freedom. So freedom comes across in different ways from different characters. But you're right. That can be one of the theme. Very good. Yeah.
One point about the black and white race you said. Those people are called as Afro-American, colored. They are called as colored in South Africa, but not sure in America what they are addressed as.
I'm not sure if there is a specific word for them. African Americans in America are people who are black but then living in America. Right? Those are African Americans. But it's interesting what they're called in. What did you say? South Africa.
South Africa. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Think about the themes. Think about the story, think about the themes, and then if you have any questions, we can discuss those. We are at 1:05. I'm going to take about 10 minutes more so that you get a solid break between the sessions. But like always, we will talk about answering questions from this unit. The first one is discuss the themes of The Sun Also Rises. Your course book talks about alienation as the major theme, but you can also talk about all the themes that we have discussed, right? Like lost generation, you can talk about love, you can talk about freedom, you can talk about violence, you can talk about whatever, right? Now, the second one is examine light in August as a struggle between good and evil. Like I said, this is a subjective answer. There is no right or wrong answer for this. Every answer is right. So if you know the story and the major characters, you can easily write this answer. Like we discussed, Joe Christmas can be on the evil side, Lena on the good side, or you can say Byron is on the good side, Christmas is on the bad side. You can get other characters. We only talked about the major characters. If you actually read the plot and story, there are many other characters in the novel. So this is a very subjective one. But like I said, I'll repeat it. When you're calling a character good, you'll also have to tell why you think that character is good. When you're calling somebody an evil character, you also have to explain why you think that person is an evil character. Okay. Let us very quickly move on to contemporary fiction. Okay. Now this word is a little problematic. Contemporary. What does it even mean? I mean, contemporary fiction, right? When does it start? When does it end? Okay. For the purposes of our discussion, now that we've discussed the 20th century American fiction, let's move a little further and discuss contemporary fiction. We will define contemporary fiction as whatever writing happened after World War II. Okay, so anything after 1945 is contemporary fiction for us. Okay, can we go with that definition? Yeah, Sai Lakshmi, you were trying to say something?
Yes, sir. After the World War.
Okay, after World War II, there have been two world wars.
Yes, sir.
Right, so after 1945, we'll call it contemporary fiction. So one thing that is obvious is the post-war novel, right? Whenever there's a war, there has to be post-war period, and then what do people write about in that post-war period? They write about the war and then the impacts of the war on people, right? Now this war, or two wars, now we are talking about two wars, right? The wars have brought in, like, dislocation, not just physically. People that just didn't move from one place to another place, but they also, these wars have brought in dislocation mentally also, right? They were disillusioned. They didn't know what to do, and then they were directionless. Now this is actually the time when the concept of middle class kind of sort of grew in the US. It was there before, but then it came into the limelight during this time. So now the problems and issues of middle class are different from the pre-war problems of, businessmen and elite of the past, right? These people have completely different problems. So the problems of the middle class have become a major theme during this time, the post-war period. But that's not what the writers of this period were talking about, but they were also talking about something else. Now, if you look at war, right, along with the human loss, accepted that there are a lot of people who have died in the war, but apart from the human loss, think about the survivors. The war has also had a lot of impact psychologically on people, right? We have seen this in Hemingway's Jake Barnes, right? This fellow was not only, he didn't only have the war wound, but he also was impacted psychologically. So the war actually induced this aggression in people. They were trying to control their life because they were thinking that the life is going out of control, their own life. They had this desire for power and so on. So these things were there in the general society. But not everyone can realize these desires, right? I mean, if I am completely dislocated psychologically and I think, okay, I want to be the most powerful person in, my area, I just cannot do it, right? I mean, not everyone can realize these desires. So what do? They search for other avenues. We have seen, in Faulkner's work, we've seen that alcohol is one of the ways. But then we will not talk about alcohol here, but we'll talk about drug addiction. And there is a reason why I'm talking about drug addiction here. Drug addiction is one way in which people escaped the realities of the time. Okay. Why are we talking about drug addiction here? One person that comes immediately to mind is William Burroughs. In his writings, he used drug addiction as a metaphor for other types of addiction, not just addiction, but other types of addiction, like, addiction to control, addiction to power, addiction to cruelty, and such topics, right? But why are we talking about drug addiction here? Why are we talking about Burroughs here? Because Burroughs was part of a group called the Beat Generation, like the Lost Generation. There is something called Beat Generation. Does anybody know what Beat Generation is? No? Okay. Beat Generation basically is a bunch of writers who published in the 1950s, in that time period. What they did is they explored the American culture and politics through their writings. But what made this the Beat Generation? They were non-conformists in different ways, actually, not in one way, but different ways. What does that mean? That means they experimented with drugs. They made, spiritual quests through not just Christianity, but then they went through the Eastern religions, and they made spiritual quests through these Eastern religions. They experimented with their style, they experimented with the way they've written, and then these people were always high, or not always, but then most of the time they were high. And then they thought, this psychedelic, they were into psychedelic drugs, and so that's the Beat Generation. We will see why they are called the Beat Generation, but few people that immediately should come to your mind when somebody says Beat Generation is Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, Jack Kerouac, Lucien Carr, and some other people, I forget the names, but these are the main people. These are the people who are a group of people called the Beat Generation, and then they did this, like I said. Okay, now why are they called the Beat Generation? What is beat? Right now, again, just like the other word that we light, right? There can be different interpretations of what beat is. Okay, it can be these people were these people were beaten down. That's why, like in tired. I mean, I'm so beaten down. We say that, right? So they are tired. Okay, one sec. There's a chat. Right, but then I don't want to explain because that's a Lily. I'm responding to you. Yeah, but I don't want to explain what that is and give ideas.
Okay.
Okay. So what is this beat? Beat generation, like I said, right? Beat, the word beat, right? It can be tired, beaten down. That can be one interpretation. Or, we'll go back to Kerouac. What Kerouac said, who is one of the Beat Generation guys, right? He basically said, it's not just, beaten down and tired. It's more upbeat, right? Or, from a music perspective, it's on the beat. It's like that, right? I mean, that's the beat that they were talking about when they say Beat Generation. Okay. Anyway, mid 20th century and later was also the time when technological advancements happened. Lot of technological advancements happened during this period of time. So of course, whatever happens in the society will have an impact on literature. So a lot of themes in literature dealt with technological advancements. Typical example is Thomas Pynchon's V. We've discussed this in the offline class, but this was published in like early 1960s, or his other work, Gravity's Rainbow, which was published 10 years later or so in early 1970s, right? Gravity's Rainbow is actually set in Europe and at the end of World War II. And this whole story revolves around production of rockets by this German military group. And then it talks about a device called Black Device, which has to be installed on this rocket. So you can see how technology forms the main theme of this whole story. It's the main theme in Gravity's Rainbow. Such stuff happened during the mid 20th century. Now, contemporary fiction also touches on themes like, identity, American history, technology. And at the same time, we also have a lot of African-American authors writing, right? With the abolition of slavery, and then with desegregation, African-American authors had this chance of writing, starting from the early 20th century, they're writing, but then more African-Americans started writing. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, if anybody remembers, that comes to my mind. But then there's also James Baldwin writing at that time and other Black authors too. One thing that is kind of sort of good that happened is women authors like Toni Morrison, Alice Walker. These people also started writing. Okay. Now, why is this good? Because if you look, well, let's not discuss that now. Okay, we'll talk about women authors in a separate unit. There's a separate unit for them. So we'll talk about authors or women authors like Toni Morrison and Alice Walker at that point of time. But just remember that, there's a lot of change happening during this late 20th century. There's a lot of change happening, a lot of authors, a lot of stuff happening, technology advancement. It reflected in literature also. What does that mean? The themes are also slowly, steadily changing. Okay. Anyway, I'm sure your coursebook lists some other authors from this time period. So please take the time to read this unit. But I don't know when this book was written, but the book doesn't talk about post 2000 writers. Okay. After the year 2000. Some authors like, Michael Cabon or Dennis Johnson, Louise Erdrich. We will talk about her when we talk about poetry, maybe in the next class, I think. But anyway, most of these have won the Pulitzer Prize, or they were nominated for the Pulitzer Prize, or came into the last round of Pulitzer Prize, whatever. But these are just some names that you can talk about when you talk about after 2000 and later, or 2000 and later authors. Okay, what time is it? Oh, 1:16. Okay, we have like 4 minutes or 5 minutes more left. So what we'll do is, like we end all classes, we will recap with 3 questions, very simple questions. And I'm kind of sort of sure everybody knows these answers, but then anyway. So can somebody tell me who wrote The Sun Also Rises?
Ernest Hemingway.
Okay, okay, good. And then can one of you name one contemporary American author? Or let me put it in another way. Okay, let's just not go with the PPT. Can somebody define contemporary? What is the definition of contemporary according to our discussion? When we say contemporary fiction or contemporary poetry or contemporary drama, what are we talking about? What is contemporary?
Period after the Second World War,
Okay.
1940. After 1945.
Yeah, 1945 and later we are terming it as contemporary. So remember this, because we will talk about contemporary poetry. We'll talk about contemporary drama also next. Okay. And then we've talked about the third one in detail. We have had very good interpretations of the title. And others, you also go back and then think, what can it mean, Light in August? You now know the story. So you can go back and then think, what does Light in August mean?
So
Okay.
one more interpretation.
Sir, is it a term in South? Is it a term in South which means pregnancy?
Subhashmita, you were breaking at the later part of your sentence. Can you please repeat what you were saying?
Light in August means pregnancy in South America. I
South
think that
America.
means.
Sir,
American
one more
South is what you mean.
interpretation.
Okay. South America is different from
yes,
American
it is.
South, right? Okay. South side of America is American South. Okay. 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 Can you just elaborate why you think pregnancy relates to light?
Sir,
It is a saying there. That's why I just told that.
I'm so
Sir,
sorry.
I do
Again,
have
I didn't
something.
hear that critical or crucial word that you said. What was it? Can you just repeat what you just said?
It is a saying in South that light in August means pregnancy. As the story depicts pregnancy, I think so.
Oh, you're saying it's a saying in the South. Oh, is it? I didn't even know about that.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Sir,
okay,
I
very
do
good.
have one thing to say.
Yes, Afroz.
Sir, Light in August, I think Lena has gone a very big struggle in the story, no, sir. When she was pregnant, she was struggling for the father of her child.
Right.
And after so much struggle, like Dubte ko tinke ka sahara, like that, sir. When she gives birth to a child, it's like light in August.
Oh, you're saying the child is the light.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Okay. Yeah, that could be that's a wonderful interpretation. Yeah, that could be one of the interpretations.
Okay, sir.
Does everybody agree with Afroz's interpretation of the? She's basically saying why it's called Light in August is because Lena is pregnant and then she delivers the baby in August. And then because of all the troubles that Lena has gone through the novel, this baby itself is light for her.
Someone
Good.
just now said, no, sir, there is a saying in Light in August. It resembles this interpretation, sir.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah. I like that. Okay, good. Any other questions before we wrap up? Or any other comments from anybody? And like I always say, please go back to the book. Even if you read 1 page a day, it'll only take like 200 days or something. I mean, the whole book is about 220 or 230 pages. And then half of the book is filled with stories, okay? Because we are talking about stories, plots of novels, and then dramas and everything, right? So it's interesting. Please take the time to go through the book. Don't open the book 1 or 2 days before the exam, because that's not going to help. At least the first chapter, you'll have to read it multiple times so that it'll help you in your exams. Again, I don't know when your exams are, but whenever they are, it doesn't matter. Once you understand, that's it. It's quite impossible to take it away from your mind. All you'll have to do is understand what the themes are and then relate them to the stories. Okay. Okay. If nobody has anything else, let us take a pause here for today, because this is a logical pause. We have ended the 20th century and contemporary American fiction. Tomorrow, what we'll do is we will move to American poetry. Okay, we will start with the characteristics of American poetry. Then we will move on to two great American poets. One is Walt Whitman and the other one is Emily Dickinson. We'll talk about these two people. And then we will talk about, other poets that have come after, Robert Frost. And then we will end with the contemporary American poetry. Okay. Now there's a good side and a bad side to tomorrow's class. One thing is, I personally don't think we can teach poetry, right? I mean, there is nothing called teaching poetry, because if you go with Wordsworth's words and everything, it is an experience. Poetry is an experience, right? Your book is very elaborate on this section. Okay, we cannot be elaborate with the time that we have, so we are going to rush past tomorrow's session for American poetry, but take the time again to read the poems and then understand what they are talking about, and then we can talk about them even in subsequent classes. It doesn't have to be, tomorrow's class. All right. Okay. With that, I will give you an 8 minutes break. Go stretch and then have a glass of water or whatever, and then come back to your next class. Thank you all for joining the class, and I'll see you tomorrow morning or tomorrow at noon. All right.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.